severe damages and is rushed to the hospital. Well, let's ask the question here. Mrs. Palsgraf sues the Long Island Railroad. The question is the Long Island Railroad responsible for the damages to Mrs. Palsgraf? Let's dig a little bit deeper. The true issue is, was the Long Island Railroad negligent in any way, thereby leading to the damages caused to Mrs. Palsgraf? Let's dig a little bit deeper. Again, let's focus on IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. The first issue we talked about, the larger issue, is the Long Island responsible? In order to answer that, we have to determine, did they commit negligence? Well, under the doctrine of what's called respondeat superior, and I would write that in your notes, respondeat superior, and that's in your textbook in this chapter. The Long Island Railroad, or any employer, is responsible for the acts of its employees. And in this case, we have two conductors who are helping this man get on the train as the train doors are starting to close. The question is, did these conductors commit negligence? Well, let's go back to the elements of negligence. Again, Long Island Railroad, are they responsible? Well, did they commit negligence? In order to determine that, we have to incorporate the doctrine of respondeat superior. So in the rules section, we not only list out the elements of negligence, defining negligence, we have to define the rule of respondeat superior. And that's what I would expect in one of your essays. Well, in our analysis, we would go through each element of negligence. We already know that these conductors are employees of the Long Island Railroad. And if they committed negligence, the Long Island Railroad will be held responsible. Let's go through the elements of negligence. Did they have a duty of care in this instance? Well, did they have a duty of care to protect the surrounding passengers in this area by not pushing this man onto the train or pulling him? Because other people on the train could have gotten hurt. So one can make a strong argument they had a duty to actually prevent this man from getting on the train while the doors were closing. Now this case was in the early 1900s. And in this day and age, on the doors, it says, do not attempt to open the doors while closing. Stand away from the doors while the doors are closing. And it even says, stand away from the doors. Well, that was because of this case that they put these signs up. So one again can argue that these conductors did in fact have a duty of care, not to help this man get on the train and actually tell him not to get on the train or pull him away from the train. We could also argue this man had a duty of care not to get on the train. So this duty of care, which was in fact breached, relates to the people in this, what we call, zone of harm, in this immediate area. So we get to the element of negligence. Now the third element of negligence, called causation. There's two parts of causation. Causation in fact and proximate causation. Causation in fact is what we call but-for causation. What do we mean by but-for causation? Dylan, why don't you come over here and hold this for me while I help explain it so the wind doesn't take it. But-for causation and proximate causation. Let's focus on but-for causation and picture a bunch of dominoes being lined up in a room, which my son loves to do. Okay? And you tip one domino, what happens to the rest of them? They all fall until the last one goes down. Well, let's look at this. Let's analyze causation. But for the conductors trying to push and pull this man onto the train, he would not have dropped his bag, which led to an explosion, which then caused the tile to fall onto Mrs. Palsgraf. Well, that's a nice logical argument. The first domino fell, leading to all the other dominoes. However, you might ask yourself, is it logical to conclude that what they did here, the Long Island Railroad should be responsible for here? Because the zone of harm is in this area, not up here. Well, we have a concept called superseding cause, and I'd like you to write that down. Superseding cause. It was in your chapter reading. Hold that thought. Let's focus now on the second element of causation, proximate causation. I already mentioned zone or harm, or zone of harm, right here. What do we use that for? It's a concept called foreseeability. And let me ask it this way. Was it foreseeable that by pushing this man on the train, he would drop a bag? One could argue yes, that he would drop a bag. But was it foreseeable that the bag, once it dropped, would explode, causing the railroad station to vibrate strong enough, and that vibration causes a tile in the ceiling to fall down and hit Mrs. Palsgraf? Well, one could argue, well, that's ridiculous. In your own everyday speak, that's just plain ridiculous. You can't hold Long Island Railroad responsible for that. And your logic is actually right. You can't just say that in an essay. When you're writing in the business world or in the legal world, we have to apply the rules that you've learned to the facts. And while this may be a silly case, it's very, very logical. And that's the whole point of this course. My goal in this course is, yes, for you to learn much of the material in the book, but it's to take your level of thinking to a higher level, to teach you how to analytically think and to logically go through a methodical process of defining what the business issues are in a case, identifying what the rules are that apply to it, analyze it properly, and reach a logical conclusion that ultimately creates a strong argument. That isn't just for law. As a finance person as well, or as an accounting person, I can tell you that it's critical in any business field to be able to logically present your arguments. That's how you present a strong argument. At this stage of the course, yes, no answers will not satisfy. Writing even yes or no in an answer, I will X it out and you will get a 0. We need to see your thought process. And that's the case in any relationship, especially if you're dating someone. They're going to want to see your thought process, so keep that in mind. It's a scary thought, but they want to know what you're thinking. Getting back to this. So we have proximate causation. Could we argue that it was not foreseeable, reasonably foreseeable, that this person would have explosives, in this case fireworks, in their bag? The answer is yes. Okay? It is not reasonably foreseeable. We could argue that these explosives are a superseding cause. What does that mean? Picture those dominoes lining up. And in each stage, for example, here the man running down the steps is the first domino. The conductors helping the man onto the train as the door's closing, second domino. As he's getting onto the train, the bag falls, third domino. Fourth domino, the bag explodes. Fifth domino causes a vibration. Sixth domino, the ceiling falls and hits Mrs. Palsgraf. Seventh domino, boom, she suffers injuries. So you have 7 dominoes. A superseding cause will create a wall at some point in between one of the, or 2 of those dominoes, breaking the link between the first domino and the 7th domino. Okay? That is a superseding cause. It breaks the causal link from these chains of events to the ultimate event. Okay? Therefore, one could logically argue the conductors here owed a duty of care to the people in this car, the people in this surrounding area, and to this man, to not push him or pull him onto the train, because he could get hurt, or they could cause people around the train to get hurt. Now, if you've ever been in New York City and on a train on the Long Island Railroad or even at Grand Central Station, they're packed. There are people standing around the door area, so people could get hurt. Again, the zone of harm. So yes, the Long Island Railroad could be held responsible for the acts of these conductors with respect to the people in this zone of harm, but not with respect to Mrs. Palsgraf, who's on the other end of the platform, for 2 reasons. 1, she's not in the zone of harm. Okay? And 2, the duty of care is owed here. Therefore, it is not reasonably foreseeable. And this, third, the explosives act as a superseding cause. So that's your logical analysis. So we would argue, in this case, the Long Island Railroad should not be held responsible because we cannot hold the conductors liable for negligence because